let's see. Okay, there we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to be kicking off the Building a Better Juvenile Justice System, our community forum today. So thank you for being here during this after work time, right? Hi, everyone. My name is Nia Moreweathers, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a community organizer with a local nonprofit organization called Youth Forward. We focus on changing negative and unhealthy environments for marginalized youth via policy advocacy. But tonight, I am a representative and representing Sacramento Kids First Coalition. The Sacramento Kids First Coalition is a community-based organization, 28 different community-based organizations, and over 1,600 individual members who aspire to increase opportunities for vulnerable youth in Sacramento and to reduce the criminalization of youth. We're gathering here today because we know that we are at a turning point for juvenile justice in our county. For far too long, our criminal justice system has separated Black and brown youth from their families and communities to warehouse them in prisons. And for decades, we have taken that law enforcement approach. We know that that doesn't really work, right? So within the next 2 years, the youth prisons in our state will be closed for good. Sacramento County will become responsible for all our systems impacted youth and will receive millions of new dollars from the state to create a new juvenile justice system that functions to better serve our marginalized youth. By law, the county is now mandated to create a system grounded in positive youth development and in community-based approaches. And so as community advocates and concerned citizens, we must organize to hold Sacramento County accountable to do what's best for our young people. So give me 2.5 seconds. I'm going to share my screen for you guys. If my screen will let me. Okay. So our vision for this work. Our vision for this work is a community-based system that supports healing from trauma, that reintegrates young people into their communities, and that is grounded in cultural relevance and youth development. The system should fund and will fund and partner with community-based organizations who are proven to be in leading roles in supporting the healing process for systems impacted youth, right? One of those things that we wanted to emphasize was a non-custodial staffing approach. And so our purpose today is to educate our community about the changes underway to the juvenile justice system, to get to know the community leaders involved in the planning process, and to receive an update from our probation department. This is just one of many steps that we'll take together in the coming months to organize and fight for this vision. So, with that out of the way, I would like to kick this webinar off with a spoken word performance by one of Sacramento's talented artists, Coley World. Coley World is a program manager with Improve Your Tomorrow who mentors young men of color to get them through higher education. He's a Bay Area native and a motivational speaker as well. So Coley, I will toss it over to you. Thank you so much.
First of all, thank you, Nia and Sacramento Kids First for having me here to be a performer. So my name is Coley World, and the last name World That's not my real last name, but it's my name because my motto is to be able to create your own world, to be able to create the life that you want to live, and you don't have to accept the one that's given to you. That's my main message. And I'm here today as a spoken word artist, and this piece is called We Like Guns. Because we like guns, yeah, and they like us too. Because we like guns, and they like us too. Because we like guns, yeah, and they like us too. Because we like guns, and they like us too. Because we like guns, and they like us too. Blue lives caused kings to lay in red puddles. They said his coat was dark, and that's what made him dangerous. But their reason wasn't subtle. A dark coat with a brown layer under. They said his skin made him a target. Press for a penalty for what we know they won't charge it. Frequent escape from repercussion. Exemption from penalty is a sanctuary. No disciplinary. Success has been revoked as an invitation. Put kings behind bars. But we not the ones needing rehabilitation. Because guns like us, but we don't want them to. Say he don't want to face it no more. But he don't have a choice to. Because we like guns. Yeah. And they like us too, because we like guns, and they like us too, because we like guns, yeah, and they like us too, because we like guns, and they like us too. So now he claps the aftermath Kalashnikov, straight oblivious to the damage that it causes. He entered the war, but never studied how it started. Now his love for his people and collectivism is discarded. In the grand scheme of things, it's not his fault though. He just got caught up in a cycle. Taught that he is nothing and has nothing to give. The street's the only way to live. There's no hope in his neighborhood, and all positivity's taught to forbid. Now he chased down dead end. Couldn't call a friend. Muzzle aimed at his heart. He put his hands up. Said, don't shoot. Then his life fell apart. Because guns like us, and we don't want them to. Said he don't want to face it no more. But we ain't got a choice to. That's my time. Thank you so much for having me today.
Please give Coley a virtual round of applause, y'all. That was so wonderful and incredible. We got snaps, 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 snaps. Just so y'all know, he's got a YouTube channel, so please go frequent his YouTube channel. It's called This Coley's World, okay? If you need a little bit of motivation for your Monday, if you need a little bit of good feeling, head over there. That was wonderful. And so as we move into the rest of our night and the rest of these presentations, I would like for everyone just to remember that we have a question and answer section, right? There's a chat. So if you've got questions about any of the information that you're seeing presented, please participate there. My colleague Monica will be monitoring that chat. So if you need a quick answer to something, she can help you out with that. Again, another reminder, all of the presentations being shared tonight and the recording of this webinar will go out next week on Monday. So if there are any questions about where can I get this presentation, you don't have to ask it. It will be coming to you. So with that, we have a tight agenda and we're already kind of running over time because of technical difficulties in the beginning. So I'm going to toss it over to our first speaker of the night, Frankie. He's an attorney with the National Center of Youth Law. He leads a team of attorneys, policy advocates, and community organizers to transform the youth justice system. His work is focused on eliminating the practice of prosecuting children in the criminal justice system, reducing youth's involvement with the juvenile justice system, and increasing resources and community-based services for system-involved youth in California and nationally. And as a youth, Frankie was sentenced to serve 15 years in the California Youth Authority for armed robbery, released on parole. After 6 years, Frankie attended law school and became an expert in juvenile law and policy with a focus on ending harmful punishments and expanding developmental opportunities for youth who come into conflict with the law. And so with that, I'll hand it over to you, Frankie. Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Let me just start my presentation, and thank you for the introduction. I just want to mention at the top that my colleague Laura, who will follow my presentation, and I and a number of other youth justice advocates, including many formerly incarcerated folks and system impacted leaders around the state, were involved with the legislature and with the governor's office in crafting SB 23. And I don't say that to claim any credit, recognizing that this is somewhat of a complicated bill, is far from perfect, but it represents essentially a compromise between the legislature and the governor's office, with a number of competing interests. Last year, as we all remember, we had COVID take us, into a completely different space, economic downturn, and the governor proposed shutting DJJ in the same year completely as a cost-saving measure, which we all, in terms of the advocates and the legislature, agreed would have been disastrous, resulting in many more Black and brown and other vulnerable youth being sent to the adult system for lack of a viable alternative in the juvenile system, while also subjecting young people to what I would consider deplorable conditions at the county, because many counties just didn't have and still don't have the capacity, the facilities, the resources, and the culture to deal with young people currently being served by DJJ. And so SB 823 is an effort to, in a sense, wind down slowly the closure of DJJ while allowing counties to ramp up capacity in order to ultimately serve young people, many of whom have complicated needs, many of whom have committed some of the more serious offenses, closer to home with trauma-informed care in the least restrictive environments. And as we'll discuss in our presentation, that is a challenge, but I think the more that we're informed, the better we're able to engage and the best possible outcome will result. For those who are not familiar, SB 823, its purpose is to close DJJ over time to ensure that young people are served closer to their home and their families to receive age-appropriate treatment, and provide counties with funding to implement public health approaches and build capacity to support positive youth development. It's also the purpose is to reduce confinement of youth with trauma-informed, culturally relevant, developmentally appropriate, and community-based responses, reduce and then eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in the youth justice system, to reduce transfers to the adult system, and ultimately to also establish a statewide office that can provide technical assistance and oversight to the counties as they implement SB 823, some people refer to as juvenile realignment, but really to implement a trauma-informed public health approach within the youth justice system to serve all young people, but in particular, DJJ eligible youth. I've divided my presentation into two sections. One will describe state level changes, or rather changes that we'll experience at the state level, following with a overview of changes that we'll experience at the county level. And as I mentioned before, SB 823 intends to close DJJ over time, but 823 as passed by last year doesn't have a final closure date, but that closure date has been provided in subsequent legislation passed this year, which is summer of 2023. The dates that it did provide was a general intake closure of July 1st, 2021, that being this summer, for what I imagine would be most cases, but it provided an exception for young people who commit 707B offenses. There are enumerated offenses in the WIC code that are essentially robbery, kidnap, violent sexual assault, and murder, and everything in between. And the reason for that is because we want to reduce transfers to the adult system by leaving DJJ open until complete closure, only for those cases who stand a risk of being transferred to the adult system. The cost issue here would be counties would be required to pay $125,000 per youth up until the young person attains age of 23, up until final closure. And so that is the elements intended to help close DJJ. In terms of the Office of Youth and Community Restoration, this is a state agency that would reside within the Health and Human Services Agency, whose mission is to promote trauma-responsive, culturally informed services for youth involved in the juvenile justice system. And specifically what the OYCR will do, it'll come online July 1st of this year, will provide oversight of SB 823 grant programs, which I'll discuss in a little more detail. Also to collect and report on statewide data that is submitted to the state agency by the 58 counties and make available to the public, as well as focusing on research and best practices in youth justice and providing technical assistance to counties to develop best practices that are rooted in research. And I would say beyond best practices, promising and other practices that are shown to be effective with the population, whether or not they are deemed best practices by people. It will also have an ombuds person with investigatory powers. This is important because we don't currently have such an ombuds person for juvenile justice. So beginning July 1st, this ombuds person and their team would be empowered to receive complaints coming from the counties, from facilities, whether it's youth, other staff, or families of young people who have complaints or are experiencing some level of injustice, whether illegal or otherwise. Also, the OYCR will become responsible for the administration of all juvenile justice funding programs by 2025. So above and beyond SBA 23's grant programs, it will basically assume responsibility for the many grant programs that the BSCC currently administers that go to counties for juvenile justice administration. In terms of changes that will be experienced at the counties, as I mentioned before, DJJ will close, the funding will go to counties, and the counties will receive their share of state level funding to administer or rather implement SBA 23 according to a formula. And that formula is based on 3 different variables, which is the overall county juvenile population age 10 to 17. That will account for 20% of the county's funding. The average daily population that the county has at DJJ in the prior 3 years, and that'll account for 30% of the county's money. And 50% will be based on the county's juvenile felony arrest rate. And the reason why it's divided this way is because we wanted to make sure that counties who historically have over-relied on DJJ and have not created innovative and more effective programming to reduce recidivism don't receive a windfall. In other words, we don't want to reward counties who have been doing badly in terms of diverting more youth out of the system or serving young people in trauma-informed and developmentally appropriate ways. Meanwhile, we also want to recognize that there are many counties who have a lot of young people proportionally and also experience higher crime rates, but are doing other things, not relying on DJJ. And so we have these 3 variables. And so beginning this year, the money that will go out to the 58 counties that will be divided based on this formula is a total of approximately $40 million. The following year, it'll increase to $118 million. The following year, it'll increase to $192 million. And ultimately in 2024 and beyond, the counties will share some portion of $209 million. And at that point, the state will then develop a new formula to distribute counties on some basis. And also, along with this money, in order for counties to be eligible to receive this funding from the state to implement SBA 23, counties must develop a JJCC subcommittee that is charged with developing the county's plans. And we'll discuss that a little bit further. But the idea is that this JJCC, this Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, is comprised of multidisciplinary stakeholders like a judge, DA, defender, social services, education, mental health, and no less than 3 community members that are defined in statute as youth advocates, youth services providers, and formerly system-involved youth. And the reason why these members were designated as such is because these are all people who have something to contribute to a solution to changing our culture away from corrections and towards a community-driven, trauma-informed, developmentally appropriate model that is really focused on health and not punishment, which has been a failure, and I think that any honest person would agree. And lastly, there was a one-time facilities grant of $9.6 million that has been distributed by the BSCC for who knows what purpose, but some counties have used that to update their facilities and others for other activities. Lastly, as I mentioned before, a big focus of SB 823 was reducing transfers to the adult system that would result from a closure of DJJ. And in order to create a place for young people who are committing the most serious offenses, or even for older youth, like 17-year-olds who commit moderately serious offenses, we wanted to make sure that those young people are not sent to the adult system. And so at the local level, local juvenile court jurisdiction has been raised to age 23 or age 25, depending on the young person's sentence or the disposition, to allow juvenile courts and juvenile facilities to keep young people up to age 25 to mirror what currently is possible at DJJ. And as I mentioned previously, DJJ intake will still be open to receive cases where a motion for transfer was filed in that case, whether or not a transfer hearing actually occurred. And so to put it another way, if the person is eligible to be transferred and there was a motion, whether or not the transfer hearing actually happened, that person will be eligible to go to DJJ until complete closure, July 2023. And as I mentioned before, counties will be getting varying amounts of money. This chart here reflects what they will get at pretty much the peak of funding beginning in 2024-2025 fiscal year. And as you can see, Sacramento County, as of June 30, 2020, had 48 young people at DJJ, with approximately 33 young people being committed in a single year of 2019, which is a high amount. But they're given youth population age 10 to 17 yours would be 163,000, which is maybe is less than, for example, Riverside, but more than but more than other counties like Fresno and Contra Costa. But and I mentioned that because you can see what the amount for Sacramento would be, which would be $9 million, and that again is based on the average daily population at DJJ, the total youth population age 10 to 17, as well as the county share of juvenile felony arrest rates. And if you compare that to another county like Los Angeles, who has high numbers across the board, Los Angeles in its peak year would get $40 million. And a small county like Santa Cruz would get less than $1 million. And so that is the money that counties will get to implement SB 823. What SB 823 also left open and was ultimately developed and passed this year was this new secure track or new disposition track. And if you think about what it means to go to DJJ, for the courts, traditionally they determine whether a young person committed an offense that makes them eligible for DJJ, and some determination is made that the young person is able to benefit from the programs and services at DJJ. And that's pretty much all that happens on the court side. But once they get to DJJ, there is an evaluation and assessments that occur around mental health, substance use, education, and a treatment plan is developed by the division. And once there are treatment plans that are reviewed at annual hearings. At the annual hearings, there's a parole hearing that takes into account progress on those plans and an opportunity to reduce commitment time, so time cuts essentially. And when young people go home, if they violate the conditions of their probation, they can be returned to DJJ. But that has changed. So now that DJJ is going away, we need a process to recapture a lot of what will be lost with the closure of DJJ. And so what was passed this year, which was SB 92, replaced a lot of these functions and processes and established in statute this new secure track, which pretty much describes and provides guidance on, establishes secure youth treatment facilities, which are supposed to be the least restrictive environments that are appropriate environments to serve young people. It provides eligibility and procedural requirements that courts must adhere to when committing a young person to a secure youth treatment facility, baseline terms, and at the moment, we're pretty much adopting what DJJ currently has, which are like a 2-year commitment time for a robbery or 6 to 7 years for murder, and lesser or more times depending on the severity of the offense. And that's in order to ensure that counties are not sentencing kids to disparate terms or justice by geography. For example, without this, what's to stop a county from committing a 14-year-old to a secure youth treatment facility for 7 years or 11 years up to age 25, and in a different county giving a kid 1 year in a secure youth treatment facility? We want to make sure that they are consistent across the board so that we don't allow counties to do different things for similar cases. Also is guidance on developing youth treatment plans, regular process hearings with opportunities for time reductions, and how to handle probation revocations. Lastly, SB 823 also required the state or the DOJ to convene a work group and develop a plan for to the OYCR around updating our juvenile justice case processing system, which is our state level data system, which is pretty antiquated. It's about 30 years old. Let's just say it's very inadequate and pretty shameful coming from the state, the tech capital of the world. We could do better and will do better beginning hopefully around 2023. And then lastly, here's just a timeline, a snapshot of the timeline. We see starting from the left, Governor signed SB 823, July 1st, intake ends, the OYCR is established, and juvenile court jurisdiction is extended to 25 to all counties. The OYCR will begin taking plans from the counties for distributing the first round of funds September 21st, and every year thereafter, counties are to submit plans to the OYCR on May 1st for distributing those funds the following September. I'll kick it over to Laura, unless there's any clarifying questions about anything that wasn't really clear on my end. I don't know if there's time. Sorry, I shouldn't.
We'll hold those questions. If there are any questions around Frankie's presentation, pop them into the chat. We'll do our best to try and address some of those questions for you. Please do remember, we will have these presentations made available to all of you the following Monday. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Laura and just introduce her very briefly. So Laura Rodolfi is a member of the Social Justice and Wellbeing team with West Haywood Burns Institute. And Laura has more than 15 years of experience working to reduce racial and ethnic disparities in national and state policy and in local jurisdictions across the country. She provides technical assistance to BI sites in analyzing whether and to what extent policies and practices contribute to racial and ethnic disparities in the justice system, and assists in developing local strategies to reduce those disparities. In partnership with community-based organizations and advocacy groups, Laura also works to advocate for state policy changes in California to invest resources into community alternatives to the justice system and to reduce the harms of justice system involvement on the lives of people of color. She's a graduate from University of California, Berkeley School of Law. With that, I'll give it over to Laura.
Great, thank you, Nia. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen too. Okay, can everyone see? Great, thank you. So, I just want to start off, first of all, thank you to Nia and to all of you. It's really an honor to be here virtually with you all today. As Nia said, I'm from the Burns Institute, and we're a national nonprofit based in Oakland, and we work to challenge racial hierarchies in the administration of justice and in other public serving sectors. And before I jump into the presentation, I just want to share the image you see right here, which is Haywood Burns himself, and his image is what our organization is named for. He was a bold visionary of his time and era, and was an attorney who worked on behalf of many people who were locked up and facing injustices. And he was fiercely committed to fighting oppression in the deepest corners of the American experience. And I just want to draw his spirit into this virtual room to honor his legacy as I join you today to talk about some of the deepest corners of our justice system and some of California's most vulnerable young people, the vast majority of whom are youth of color. So I want to start just by reiterating a theme that we heard from Frankie, which is that SB 823 and the closure of DJJ present a really important opportunity to challenge some of the commonly held notions of justice for young people that are accused of some of the most serious offenses. And it gives us a really important opportunity to shift away from the failed approach to justice that focuses on custody and suppression and control, and to embrace a more enlightened approach to justice and how we administer justice in a way that centers racial and ethnic equity, that's anchored in principles of youth development, and that focuses on the healing of young people in their community. So I'm going to talk through some of the key data that we need to keep in mind as we think about these opportunities that are presented with SB 823. The first thing is that I want to just share that some of the important changes in law in California have done powerful work to reduce the number of young people who are exposed to the most punitive thing we can do to a young person in the state of California, and that is to try them as an adult and subject them to long and harmful prison sentences. We saw important changes in Proposition 57 in 2016 with the elimination of the prosecutor's ability to directly file cases in adult court. And after Proposition 57, young people can only be prosecuted as adults when the DA files a motion for transfer and a judge makes a decision about transferring that case. And then we also saw the decline even further with SB 1391 in 2018, which ended the prosecution of 14 and 15-year-olds as adults. But as you can see here in this chart, in the state of California as a whole, as the number of youth who are prosecuted as adults decreased, and that's that red line on the top, the number of youth who've been committed to DJJ, and that's that gray line at the bottom, has really increased. And the reduction in adult court prosecutions is substantial. I mean, you can see that in 2008, it was sort of at its peak, about 1,200 young people prosecuted as adults. And as a result of a number of reforms and new information about youth development and the harms of prosecuting young people as adults, we've seen a tremendous decrease in 2019 all the way down to 64 youth. So one of the most important things that we need to be mindful of, and one of the fears that I know I have and Frankie talked about, is that the closure of DJJ could result in more youth being prosecuted as adults. And so as we think together, it's really crucial that we develop viable and healing-centered options that exist within the youth justice system. Another reason to do that is because the justice system, and particularly the deepest harms of the justice system, are reserved almost exclusively for young people of color. And so SB 823 also provides us with an opportunity to really question that. As you all probably know, Black, Brown, and Indigenous young people bear the brunt of the justice system decision-making in California, and that is particularly acute at the most harmful and punitive decisions. And what we see right here are data from the whole state of California looking at commitments to DJJ. And here you can see the rate of DJJ commitments per 100,000 white youth in the state. There are 2.8 committed to DJJ. For every 100,000 Black youth in the state, 43 committed to DJJ. And when we compare those numbers and we look at the chart on the right, we can see that when we compare the rates of Black youth to white youth and Latino youth to white youth, we can see that for every 1 white youth committed to DJJ, 15 Black youth are committed. And for every 1 white youth committed, 4 Latino youth are committed. The same thing is true when we look at adult court prosecutions. So here you can see for every 100,000 white youth in the state of California between the ages of 14 and 17, there were 10 prosecuted as adults. For every 100,000 Black youth, 112 prosecuted as adults. And for every 100,000 Latino youth, almost 36 youth prosecuted as adults. Again, when we compare those numbers and we look at the rates compared to white youth, we can see that youth of color are significantly more likely to be prosecuted as adults. Black youth are 12 times more likely, and Latino youth 4 times more likely. And so these data just really speak to why bigger and bolder and more transformative change is needed, and to challenge racial inequity as we look at the opportunities within SB 823. So here we're looking at some of the same data that I shared in that first slide, but these are data just for the County of Sacramento. And when we look at the data here, we can see the trends for DJJ versus adult courts. We can see that basically the same thing is happening as what happened at the state level. Here you can see that red line, adult court prosecution, has really decreased, and that gray line at the bottom, which is DJJ commitments, has increased in recent years. And in 2014, before Proposition 57 ended the direct file of young people in adult court, there were 49 youth prosecuted as adults in Sacramento, according to the Department of Justice data that we have access to. And by the time we get to 2017, 2018, 0 youth prosecuted as adults. And we don't have access to the 2019 data for adult court prosecution, so that's why that's blank there. But at the same time, you can see the same thing we saw at the state level, which is a steady increase in the number of young people who are committed to DJJ, from 5 youth in 2012 to 33 youth in 2019. And I also want to just note that there's nothing in the law that requires that young people are prosecuted as adults. It's completely at the discretion of the district attorney to file that motion for transfer. If that motion for transfer doesn't happen, all cases would remain under juvenile court jurisdiction. And we're starting to see district attorneys in some counties abandon this harmful practice. Last year, we saw this in Los Angeles County. George Gascon, when he was sworn into office, announced that as part of his directives, the office would no longer prosecute youth as adults. And we're hopeful that we'll see this happen more frequently. I think the more we learn about adolescent development and the real harms of adult court prosecution, both on public safety and on the well-being of youth, the more I hope we'll see district attorneys' offices back away from this practice. But again, the data here are key, and in particularly in Sacramento County, where there's been an increased reliance in DJJ with the reduction of adult court prosecution, we really need to be monitoring what's happening with adult court prosecutions to make sure that the numbers don't increase again. Next, I'm going to just show a little bit of data that reinforces the same message. These are data that come from CDCR, and every 6 months, they do a snapshot of who's in DJJ. And the snapshot goes back from 2010 and the most recent to 2020. And again, you see a similar trend to what we saw in the data for commitments on an annual basis. But here, what you can see is that when you look back to December of 2013, where the arrow starts, we can see that there were 17 youth in DJJ at the time of the snapshot. And then since 2015, that number has steadily increased. And in the most recent snapshot, we see in June of 2020, there were 48 youth in DJJ. So all of these data are really important. It's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what I think a committee needs to know about what's happening with young people that are subject to DJJ or subject to adult court prosecution in the county. What I'm sharing here are some data that we at the Burns Institute used when we did some work on DJJ transition planning in Los Angeles County. And we asked for and received from the probation department some key data on, for the last 5 years, how many young people were committed to DJJ, what youth were eligible for DJJ but received an alternative disposition at the local level, how many youth were directly filed in adult court pre-Proposition 57, how many youth had a transfer motion versus a transfer hearing versus transferred to adult court, to see sort of the trajectory, and also to note whether or not there's some cases that where a transfer motion is filed and then there's a stipulation or a plea agreement that the district attorney will drop the motion for transfer, withdraw that motion if the young person will stipulate to DJJ, because it helps to tell the story of what the county relies on for justice system decision making for this target population. And all the data we're looking at really need to make sure you disaggregate it by race, ethnicity, by gender, by the age of the youth at offense, and at the time that they were committed, and the resident zip code, as well as what offenses they were either committed to DJJ for, handled locally, or prosecuted as adults. And we've developed a number of different templates that we are happy to share for anyone if that's helpful, but it helped to get a sense of what's actually happening at the county level. Because like I said, those data that I shared from CDCR and from the Department of Justice are really the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to know as you go on your planning process. I'm going to talk very briefly, I think I have about 5 minutes left, about some opportunities that exist within the planning for DJJ closure. And I'm going to focus just on some of the alternative models. We have a number of other things that are really important, including the Office of Youth and Community Restoration that Frankie mentioned, and this local planning process that many of you are involved in, and that's so critical to the success of SB 823. So what I'm going to focus on is just, reminding us that the intent of SB 823 is for there to be a continuum of responses for young people who are involved in the justice system, and that legislatively we need to be thinking about putting the system using the least restrictive appropriate environment for young people who are coming into the justice system. And so it really, as we think about what happens at the local level and what the planning needs to look like, we need to be thinking more expansively about the opportunities that exist for engaging community organizations in the work, for thinking more transformatively about what can exist for young people and not feeling constrained by what is. There's funding available for us to really think creatively about what is the best healing-based approach for young people who are otherwise subject to DJJ. Want to just reiterate something that I think many of you probably have seen, heard, or know about, and that's just the harms of using juvenile hall. And also just thinking about, as we think about the least restrictive environment, it is not juvenile hall. Juvenile hall is certainly more restrictive, has more security measures, even than DJJ does. So as we close DJJ and move from a system that is a failed approach, that is harmful for young people, and we've acknowledged this at a number of levels, really wanting to think about how we don't recreate that at the local level. And I know many of you probably have seen this report, this survey that came out from the Board of State and Community Corrections earlier this year that looks through what counties are planning to do. And I was dismayed as I looked at the report to note that a number of counties are considering and have even developed a plan for using their juvenile hall as their local alternative to DJJ and to serve as that secure youth treatment facility that Frankie talked about, that's designated in SB 92. And Sacramento is included within that. Doesn't mean that Sacramento is going to use that, but at the time of this survey, that was what was in the planning process. So hoping to see and hear a little bit more about what that might look like as the planning process moves forward. And just want to offer up some resources around, some research that reaffirms the harms of juvenile hall. And this one in particular is one that comes from the Pacific Juvenile Defender Center and the Youth Law Center. And it just has a number of important findings in it that look at use of juvenile hall, but really just says that counties shouldn't simply move youth otherwise subject to DJJ into juvenile halls, which are often jail-like facilities that severely restrict movement, lack adequate programming and educational space, and are operated by staff who lack the training to work with the complex behavioral needs of incarcerated youth. So just a reminder to keep all of that research in mind. And also to look beyond, and there's a number of research studies out there that that really affirm the importance of engaging community and in process like this. And I just want to highlight a few of the studies that are out there. There's a number of studies that say that young people who have experienced the justice and the young people who've experienced the justice system can tell us themselves that what works best for young people who make mistakes is connection to community, not incarceration. So these studies sort of all together, and many more that aren't up here, reaffirm that the justice system responses for youth charged with violent offenses that are punitive are unnecessarily expensive, ineffective, and unjust, that removing young people from their homes increases the risk of reoffending compared to community-based approaches, and that youth of color are more likely than white youth to be incarcerated rather than to benefit from those community-based interventions. And then I'm going to wrap up here just by offering up, the importance of looking beyond what is. And I know that there's sort of a big gap often between what is and what we want to see. And so just thinking about where do we look for resources for alternative models, and what do we want as a community to see in order to achieve well-being? What would we want in a facility, in programming, and in staffing to promote a more holistic and healing-based approach? And one model is the Alternative Rehabilitative Communities, which is ARC. It's what you see here on the left. And it's a family-run organization in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that's been around for 45 years. It's run by a man by the name of Daniel Elby. And they take kids who are committed by the court for serious offenses, and they live in what you see right here. It's a house you drive down the street, you wouldn't know it from any other house. And their whole philosophy is to make their experience as close to home as possible. The house looks like any other house in the neighborhood. Youth cook together, they eat together, there's a large yard. And really critical to the success of the program, ARC hires staff that are well suited to work with and connect with young people who they serve. It's young people who have been impacted by the justice system themselves. And so there's a really high success rate in this program. And then another is on the right here, you can see it's Credible Messengers. And this is a picture of Clinton Lacey, who's the director of Youth and Department of Youth and Rehabilitative Services in DC. And Clinton has developed an approach to use credible messengers to serve as mentors to youth who are committed to his department, again, often for serious and violent offenses, and working with those young people outside of custody. And again, these credible messengers are folks in the community who were themselves impacted by the justice system and can therefore relate to and connect with young people at a really different level. And I'll also just say, before I wrap up, there's a number of other places to look. There's from New York, there's the Close to Home movement. And we can really think, if we want to think more expansively, look outside of even the United States to places like New Zealand. We had a great conversation in our work in Los Angeles with Judge Greg Davis from the Matariki Court in New Zealand, really thinking about their approach to justice and how we can embed certain components of that model into what exists in California. So I just, I guess I'll wrap just by saying that I think, it's really important for us to think transformatively and expansively about the opportunities with SB 823, because it does give us a great chance to challenge some of the notions of justice that rely on punishment, suppression, and control, and to reimagine an approach to justice that honors youth's humanity, that really sees their potential, and that focuses on their healing.
Okay. All right, awesome. Frankie and Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. You guys both did an awesome job. I know that because of the little technical difficulties that we had at the beginning of this, that we're running a teensy bit behind now. So I'm just going to say a pre-thank you to all of my panelists for staying on a little bit longer this evening. If you're in the audience, you're not held to the same standard. So if you still need to leave at 6:30, that's fine. But just addressing that before we move forward, our next portion of our webinar will be our panel with our subcommittee members. We're super, super fortunate to have 4 dedicated and educated community leaders who have been appointed to our local JJCC subcommittee and who are responsible for developing this implementation plan that both Laura and Frankie have been referencing. And we're here today to let them know that we support them and that we're going to be rallying behind them as they work to change the system. I know that we also have some other subcommittee members that are in the audience, so I know that you guys are out there too. Thank you for being here, but let's get a chance to hear a little bit more from our community advocates. So I will start this little bit of a conversation off, and I'll ask Joseph to kick us off. If you can introduce yourself to our audience and share with them why you decided to apply to join this subcommittee, and then maybe pick another subcommittee member so we can keep it going.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Mia. And I just wanted to give a special thanks to Frankie and Laura. You guys did a phenomenal job presenting. That was great information, and I really appreciate it. I'll also mention I've been seeing some names pop up in the questions and the chats, and all great people that are attending. I'm looking at the numbers, and it's encouraging to see so many people interested in kind of just reimagining what youth justice could look like in Sacramento. So my name is Joseph Gray. I'm the director of Sacramento for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. We're a statewide nonprofit. We work within re-entry and criminal justice reform. Previous to working with ARC, I have previous experience in the mental health field, program management, and direct services and advocacy. I applied to be part of the JJCC subcommittee because, same thing that we just all heard. This is just too large of an opportunity, too weighty of an opportunity to pass up on. We have the opportunity to really redefine what rehabilitation and healing and support looks like for these young people going through the system. And when that opportunity came across my eyes, I didn't want to just leave it to chance. And through ARC, I have the opportunity to interact with young people both in DJJ personally, weekly, and also in the youth detention facility weekly. And so I'm working and speaking with the actual young people that are directly impacted by the work that we're doing here. And so I have the opportunity to get their direct voice of what they need, what they want, what would be helpful for them. And I trust myself to advocate the best that I can on their behalf for their voice. So thank you, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm thankful for everybody that's attending. Let's pass it off to Mercedes.
Hi, everyone. I'm looking at myself in the camera and I'm a little emotional right now because those statistics always kind of really mess me up. So forgive me if I speak unclearly right now, but my name is Mercedes Parker. I am a community liaison for Learn for Life. We are a charter school that serves young people up to the age of 24 and continuing their high school education. And we work with a lot of youth that have been disconnected from their traditional format of school due to a lot of issues that are out of their control. or issues related to their involvement with the juvenile justice system. Prior to being a community liaison, I was a part of Freedom School. It's like one of the first things I ever did where I had to interact with young people. Sorry, I'm choking it. Because of the work that I did with Freedom School, it became apparent to me that we have an obligation as members of this community to make our future better for our young people, period. That's it. And so when I seen that Sac Youth Forward had posted that the probation department was looking for people that are in the community, that work with young people, that care about these issues and are willing to advocate for them, I stepped up immediately, even though I wasn't sure if I was really qualified, having never been impacted by the justice system myself. Although I do have siblings that have been. So that's why I'm here. Sorry, getting a little nervous. I think I echo a lot of the sentiments that Joseph just shared as far as engaging directly with youth and talking to them about what they need, and then using our privilege as adults and occupying these spaces to advocate for them and make sure that they're represented in these rooms, and that we are able to actually transform this justice system. Personally, I lean more on the side of abolition. I know that that is a marathon and not a race. And so that's a daily battle for me doing this work. I personally, I'm a strong advocate for prevention. I know how important it is for young people to have access to these resources prior to ever becoming involved with the justice system, and how often Black young people especially get excluded from those opportunities. I know that a lot of this stuff is based off of class disparities, things of that nature. So I'm just here to make sure that I'm uplifting the voices of people that are impacted by the system, and doing the best that I can to ultimately close all of these facilities. That's what I'm here to do. And I'm gonna pass it to Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mercedes, Joseph, and everybody who's currently attending right now. I would first like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional homelands of the Miwok people, otherwise known as Sacramento, California. My name is Rachel Ibarra, and I am a case manager at the Children's Law Center. I support youth in foster care who are in the family side of court and also on the juvenile dependency side. Like Joseph, I go into the facility and I meet these youth outside on a daily basis and try to offer the best services and support that I can. I've been called to do this work, not by choice, just by doors that have opened for me, and it happened without my permission. A lot of this is from personal experience. A lot of it is from family experience, and a lot of it is the passion for the Indigenous and youth of color that I work with, live with, and support on a daily basis. I too am passionate about system realignment. I too am, I echo what Mercedes says, I'm all about canceling all of this. I see the harm that it causes in families. I see how separation from families becomes more traumatic and a detriment to everybody in the community. And I was actually invited to join this committee. I didn't even really know about it. A friend of mine told me that he thought I'd be good at it. And so once I started to get a little bit more information, I figured, why not? And, you know, I was chosen, and it's not for me to be, you know, opting out of situations that I'm actually, you know, chosen for. I look to it as an opportunity to help others in the best way that I can. And I will pass it on to Sean.
Thank you, Rachel. How's everybody doing today? My name is Kong Zong. I'm with East Bay Asian Youth Center, EBAC. We are also a part of the Sac Kids First coalition. I am a youth counselor or counselor / mentor with EBAC. What we do is we work with a lot of high-risk youths. We help them with school, with family issues. We also work with them with helping them out with, some of my youths are on probation, so we help them get off probation. Some of my youths, they go in and out of juvenile hall as well. So, we do visits in juvenile hall as well. And I applied for this position. I was just like Mercedes, where I didn't think I would qualify for this position, or, I never really had any experiences being on a committee. But my boss kind of told me that, I have a lot of life experience. And, growing up in Sacramento, being around this culture and, seeing a lot of my friends going in and out of jail, the things that they went through, right, mentally, all the trauma and everything. And so I decided to apply for the position, was chosen. And so my mission and my goal with this position is to hopefully be able to make some kind of system change from the inside out, and provide better healing, more opportunities for the youth while they're incarcerated, and set up opportunities for them to be successful when they come out, and just hoping to make a better change for the juvenile system altogether.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Kong. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mercedes. And thank you, Joseph. I appreciate you introducing yourselves and sharing where you are kind of touched by the juvenile justice system and where you come and enter into this work as a community organizer. I always love asking people that question, that values question. How do you come in and how are you affected, right? I think it's really important for people to get like an understanding of that background and where you guys are coming from with this. So thank you for sharing. The second question that I'll ask you guys, and I'll try and keep us on track and close us off at 6:10 for this particular panel. But if we can spend the next 10 minutes speaking to what concerns, complications, or updates you guys can provide about the planning process so far. How has your experience as a subcommittee member been so far? I know that you guys have only met as a group a few times, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience. I think that it would help people kind of get an idea of what your role is and also what we can expect moving forward. And this time I'll start from the back. So why don't we toss this question to Kong?
Again, like you said, we haven't met a lot right now. We're still kind of reviewing the plan that the probation and YDF has set up. Right now, again, I'm just trying to see what they have to offer right now, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of keep on coming up with more ideas, connecting with more youths, and hopefully just giving more ideas to them to hopefully we could add more things to what they have set up already.
Thank you, Kong. Can I ask Rachel to answer this question? And just as a reminder, how has your experience as a subcommittee member been so far? And what kind of concerns or complications do you see arising?
Yes, thank you. So like you said, we've only met a couple of times. And so I will say the experience so far has been good. Everybody's been very respectful. Everybody's been very kind, and they've been, they really want to hear what it is that we do have to say. I think a concern that was raised the last meeting for me personally was, wanting more providers that have experience with trauma-informed care. Right. And so when they're talking about de-escalation tactics, when they're talking about de-escalation and crisis intervention, I want to know who it is that's going to be there working directly with the youth. There are people who are specially trained in those types of situations that they're there to not cause any more harm. And that's exactly what I would like to see. More community-based organization involvement as well, instead of just, the normal organizations that we see coming in and out of there. I would like to see more advocates with experience, because I think it speaks to the relatability and also the rapport building and the trust building. Advocates with that lived experience also are masterful at building relationships with other providers. And so I think that that bridge is a huge strength that I see just in the community that I'm working with now. And I'm not sure how much of that is going to be implemented, but again, it is still new. So I would say that's one of my biggest concerns, in addition to properly identifying these youth. There's disproportionate numbers of Indigenous youth and American Indian, Alaska Native youth in the system. And according to the data that we just saw today, there's not one tribal member or American Indian youth that was identified. It's all Latino or African American and white. And so that is a huge miss, I think, in all of the data across the board in every system that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you for.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Go ahead, Mercedes. I was just going to tell Rachel, thank you for sharing that opinion.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm sorry, I thought we were popcorning. My experience so far, it's my first time being on a subcommittee like this, so I wasn't really sure what to expect as far as like processes go. I will say that leadership has been very, they've been giving off the sense of wanting to be collaborative, of valuing our input, and giving us, being welcoming into this new space. The week before last, they actually took all of us on a tour of the YDF together. A lot of us on the tour had already been to the YDF. That's the youth detention facility for anybody that's unfamiliar. That was actually my first time being there in person and actually seeing the facility that we're going to be using to house the young people that are being realigned from the DJJ. And it really helped put everything into perspective for me about the work that we're trying to do here. And there's a lot of great programs in the YDF already. I don't take that away from the probation department at all. But one concern that I have is that I feel, and I think this is just a part of occupying this space and a part of being a professional law enforcement person, is that there's a very traditional way of doing things and viewing things. And sometimes when you're a newcomer into the space and the ideas that you have are a little bit more different than the standard way of doing things, even though those ideas are supported by the law at this point, I do sense that we're going to have to work towards getting those things implemented. And I just say that as far as like the availability of different programs, like adding more programs, not only that, but also getting non-law enforcement personnel within the facility to work with these youth, to act as youth advocates within the facility. That's something we're talking about it, but I'm not really sure where we're at with it right now. So that's just a personal concern that I have as of right now. But other than that, I do get a sense of strong collaboration from the probation department thus far. Those that I'm in community with have reminded me that I may have just caught a few people on a good day. I can't speak to that. But what I will say is that the probation staff members that I did have the privilege of talking to a couple of weeks ago did seem to be invested in the well-being of the youth that they were in custody of. And so I take that as a positive, but there's definitely a lot of work that we're going to need to be doing in the next few months.
I'll go ahead and jump in. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. I think that one of the priorities that we have and that we had even coming into this subcommittee was making sure that the community was involved. We are community representatives, we do our best, use all of our integrity to represent the full larger community the best that we can, but that doesn't, of course, replace or take the place of the community of Sacramento. So spaces like these, we want to prioritize them. I'm thankful that we have a probation representative here right now, but we want to prioritize making sure that the community's voice is included at every step throughout this process. We are beginning to record and share our subcommittee meetings. So if you guys are interested in hearing what we're talking about, then please tune into those. And then also creating opportunities for direct feedback from the community. And then us as the subcommittee members, committee members will do our best to make sure that those concerns are addressed in the subcommittee. So that was one of the priorities which we already have started to work on and we continue to work on. I will say that we have some great people that we are working with as far as individuals. Of course, there are the entities that they represent, and then there's individuals. And we have some great individuals. I see a few of them here in the chat and in the questions. Mark and Nancy, they could very well be on this panel with us, as well as many others. I guess one of my concerns would be the way that we will utilize the budget. It hasn't been something that we've gone into in-depth conversation about yet, but as was mentioned, I think in one of the questions already, the budget could very easily, were it not for opposition in the conversation, go majority towards salaries and additional staff and things like this, when really the whole point of the subcommittee is to develop what would be most helpful for the young people, what programs, what additional resources, what additional activities, what additional programs. And so I plan to really bring up the conversation of making sure that those funds get utilized in the way that's going to best benefit the young people, not just increase supervision. Another thing that I think is important that we will be addressing is the vocational programs. They have 2 amazing vocational programs in the YDF right now. And that's great. But those are 2. And there's a lot of other programs that can be implemented, should be implemented, just really creating opportunities for the young people to gain skills that will really propel them into success as they transition home. And so we want to increase that. We want to increase that. Not only that, but the young people enjoy the vocations. They enjoy learning these skills. They enjoy learning these new things. They enjoy working. And so that's one of the things that we, 2 is just not enough. Another thing that was mentioned, I know that Rachel and I believe somebody else mentioned it, but it's imperative that we have individuals that are within the facility, like built within the program, that aren't just probation officers, that aren't just correctional officers. We want social workers in the program and, counselors that they could talk to. We want to make sure that those with lived experience have a big part of working with the young people that they can relate to. And so that's one of the things that we also hope to implement into the program that we're having, is making sure that those with lived experience and also with the professional backgrounds to really be supportive, not necessarily just on the probation side, but outside organizations that are kind of implemented into the plan. Another thing, there's a lot, and I'm just being transparent, and I would love to hear all of the community's thoughts about it. Another thing that we are working on are making sure that the young people have opportunities to get paid while in the facility. That's one of the things that other facilities have, that the young people have specifically said, hey, this is we're not big on DJJ, but this is one of the things that we look forward to from DJJ. We actually get to work jobs and get to, practice saving and all of these things. And we want that same practice also to be available at the YDF. Let me check the time. Oh, sorry, okay, I'm over time.
I was about to get you.
My bad. I would love to talk to you all about them. I'd love to hear your feedback on them, but hopefully there are more spaces and opportunities like this where we could really get community input.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, like Joseph just mentioned, I think it's really important that we continue these types of conversations, right? I know that you had mentioned Mark and Nancy. Mark and Nancy have been in the chat talking to me about this. I think it's really important for Sacramento Kids First Coalition, as we continue to develop this conversation, to make sure that our community has those chances to connect with their subcommittee. And I know that we will be moving forward and doing that. Me and Joseph have been talking about establishing bi-monthly or quarterly meetings, so our community has a chance to engage not just with our community advocates who sit on the subcommittee, but the rest of our subcommittee members as well. So without further ado, I'm going to keep us moving forward. The next portion of our webinar will be another brief panel. This panel will be facilitated by our youth facilitator, Asia Lynn Lee. She is a youth coordinator with Hmong Innovating Politics, and she will be having our probation representative, Mr. Jacob Cullors, respond to a few questions. I will have those questions up on some slides so all of our community members can see what's being addressed. Let me just get a second to share my screen, and then I will shut off my mic so Asia and Jacob can have this conversation with the rest of us.
All right, thank you so much, Nia. All right, so yeah, just to kind of going off what everyone's amazing presentations and really informative, insights. Our first question will be, how are you focusing a healing-centered and transformative justice approach and programming being offered to youth staying in facilities?
First off, thank you again, everybody, for allowing us to be a part of this. It's a big opportunity. We see that as a department, a big opportunity to work with all of you. We should have to be dynamic and fluid in how we are going about addressing the problems that our youth face. Can you put this in, G? Sorry, my computer was giving me a ding there. I apologize. First, I'll answer this question in the macro. We started probably about 8-9 years ago, really addressing a culture change in our facility. One that was not just how we dealt with the youth, but how we hired people and how we trained them. We changed our level system, point system, as an example, to be more encouraging for good behavior, right? Like there's just been this punitive mindset for a long time in how we address things. And we went to a more encouraging, giving our kids in the facility points or privileges based on how they behaved and encouraging that behavior. Our recruitment, how we hired, instead of bringing in people, everybody here is college educated. That's a big deal for us. We're a very diverse workforce. We're actually 5% higher than any other county agency in Sacramento. And we've gone up continuously over the years with that dynamic, looking for people who are more relatable to our youth. I think that's a big deal. Changing how we look at implicit bias and cultural diversity. We've been training that actually for several years. I worked in our training department, and that was a big focus of ours. Even training the history of probation. I was looking at Mr. Dan Elby, who was on one of the slides earlier. Probation as an industry, it wasn't called probation at the time, started by a gentleman who walked into a courtroom and saw someone being given a crazy sentence for a pretty low level issue. And our industry, we started on helping people not get in the system. And so training people as to what probation started as, and helping them understand that, yeah, we do have a law enforcement component, but we are way better off as a community if we are taking the kids that are in our care and seeing them as an opportunity to put back in the community. Reentry is a big part of what we do. We are starting that from day one. When we bring a child in here, a kid in here, that we are already looking to how we can get them out of here into better circumstances and situations. Hopefully that answers it in some way. If you have please, if you have a question or something else you'd like to ask, feel free to throw that at me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that answer. Nia, if you don't mind me I'm gonna maybe jump ahead to a different question that was connecting to that. And mentioning about providing healing justice and transformative approach. With that being said, as we know, historically, a lot of police departments and probation departments have not been the originators of it. So I would like to kind of add on to that question of, will you be partnering or contracting with community-based organizations to better support those transformative justice approaches? Because especially diversity doesn't always equate to justice in these cases, especially even if they're staff. And so I think just to kind of restate that question of, will you be partnering with CBOs to better support a transformative justice approach?
Yes, we will. I know Mr. Gray is referencing in here, Ms. Sabar. We've been working with organizations that for quite a while. Burning Bush is another organization we've worked with for a long time. A lot of different programs. We've been working with UC Davis for trauma for quite a long time as well. I know that they're not necessarily community-based, but we understand that there are people that have ideas and thoughts and skill sets that we don't. And I think true wisdom comes from understanding to utilizing everybody that is available to us as a resource to help. We don't have all the answers. We know that there are people that are in our community who have either experienced this themselves or have ways or approaches that could really transform our department in helping the youth that are in our care. So absolutely, I think working with the community is vital. No man is an island, no woman's an island, no person's an island. It's important that we are kind of using a holistic approach with our community to better address these needs. It's not a one-size-fits-all problem. And I think to not use the people in our community to help us would be foolish.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Colors, and thank you, Nia, for helping me navigate those questions. I'll go back to the second question with staffing. With that being said, what type of staffing approach is probation taking with SB 823?
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take like the people that we have. I know one of the big things is we're not seeking to add staff as far as like payroll. I know that was one of the questions earlier. We're going to just take the people that we do have and reassign them to that. So it's going to, we know it's going to spread us a little bit thin, but we also understand the opportunity we have. We're going to staff just the DJJ portion of that. I don't know what else to reference at this point, but with supervisors, with senior deputy probation officers that'd be case managers, then line staff. If I have the right numbers here, we're going to have about 14 staff right now. They're dedicated to this, and that will probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to start training them up on based off the things that we talk about with the group here, also with the changes in the law. But we're not looking to add money or staff to that. It's really just taking the people we have. We had people apply for that and ask us or tell us why they would want to work in it. So it wasn't just we handpicked people that we thought were good. We asked for people who actually want to be in this program and can provide us reasons as to why they would do a good job there. And a selection was then done based off of some of those things. Obviously, people's experiences. We have people with a lot of experience here as well. Some of that came from community type organizations or working in group homes or that have a lot of experience with this population. And so we wanted to take that in consideration. So we were staffing that with the best people possible within our facility. We also, real quick before I forget, we also work with our reentry officers out in the field, our juvenile field officers who are helping our youth get reestablished out in the community. We have a Black Child Legacy campaign that we've been working with for several years that are also in the community. They're all over the place. We're finding out more and more even about what they're doing now, and it's a great program. We have several officers who are outside the facility who are dedicated to that alone, and we're going to be hoping to bring them in the groups that they work with. I have a list of about 8 organizations here of many that we would love to get in here to work with the kids that are community organizations. They're already working with us in probation outside the facility. I think this gives us a great opportunity to bring them in to the facility when they maybe not had a place in that before.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Colors. So for our next question, what enhancements or modifications to our local facilities do you feel need to be made in order to serve a new long-term population?
Yeah, one of the big ones is we would love to improve our outside facilities for like physical education type of sports and keeping our kids in good shape. I know one thing is I'm kind of looking at some notes here that we're looking to improve like just our field, maybe put a track out by our field, have better athletic services for them in that regard. We are currently working on one of our units now to transform it, taking some things out, opening the spaces up. And one of the things we want to do is to bring a little more of I know this word gets thrown around, it might be cliche, but more of a home-like thing. So bringing in different furnitures that are a little more appealing and not so institution-y. I know that's a word I'm kind of making up, but so outside it's really working on the athletic field equipment, and then inside really bringing in things that would be a little more appealing, relaxing, not quite jail looking. We know that these kids could be here for a couple of years, and so it's really changing the whole dynamic of a unit to be more home-like. I know that even in the penal code, that's what it says, that a juvenile hall is supposed to be, but we're looking how we can do that even more so with the things that we bring in.
Thank you again for answering that question. And then I believe we do have another question, right, Nia?
I was talking before I unmuted myself. I think that was our last question. So I will take the mic back from you. Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Colors, for taking the time to answer some of these inquiries that we had. And thank you, Asia, for facilitating this. I think that basically brings us to the end of our event. I'm going to use the rest of the time that we have available for question and answer. I do want to thank all of the community members who have had a chance to be on the call tonight, our youth and adults, to our state leaders, Frankie and Laura, our JJCC subcommittee members that we have here, our spoken word artist, Coley, Asia, for facilitating. Just thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. In the coming months, we will be back in touch with you to share an update on the plan that's being developed by the subcommittee. What we would ultimately like to do is review the plan and ask for your feedback, right? That's the idea of this intentional community engagement process. We get your feedback and we make the best plan that we can. We know that ultimately the Board of Supervisors will be the decision maker on the plan and how that funding gets allocated. If we believe that the plan's not going to serve our youth, we will exercise our democratic rights and we will mobilize with the Board of Supervisors to demand a better plan, if that's something that we do end up needing to do. And we will take a stand to support youth justice because that's something that is important to the Sacramento Kids First Coalition, and it's important to the advocates who have joined on this call today. But we cannot do this alone. We need you and your leadership for this long haul. Together, we're going to build our community strength and power to support our young people. Again, just thank you to all of you for joining us. And if you want to be more directly involved in this work, please join us at the Sacramento Kids First Coalition. I've shared right here on the screen our website. So please check out our website. You can get updates there. You can sign up to be a volunteer. I also know that Monica, my colleague, will be sharing something in the chat for you guys. It is a link to our action network. So if you fill out that link and you register, you will get direct email updates from us about this juvenile justice work. But again, just thank you to all of you who made the time to attend tonight. I know we went a teensy bit over time, so I want to say a big thank you to all of my panelists who are hanging in there. And just if you have any questions, please feel free to answer them. We're going to be here for the next 4 or 5 minutes trying to address those things. So just thank you to all of you. Oh yeah, one more thing. Again, as a reminder, we have a recording. We've been recording this entire time. And I do have the presentations from Laura and Frankie. So please expect an update email from me on Monday. If you registered to attend this event, you will receive an email from me. It will have a PDF format of Laura's presentation, Frankie's presentation, and it will also contain a recording of this webinar. So I will update you guys. You will have further information. I'm trying to check out what's going on in the chat here.
Yeah, Neil, we can let people know that we've been answering questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
But there is a question that I think many people are curious to know. And I don't know, Mr. Colors, if you have the answer to that, but how many youth are currently in DJJ? I don't know if you addressed that. Or sorry, YDF. Yes, Sacramento County YDF.
You mean our total population?
Yes.
We are, so I don't know right up to the moment, but as of last night, we had 127 youth.
Okay. So to address that question, I saw that question come up in the chat as well as the Q&A. Thank you, Mr. Colors.
Welcome.
I see another question here in the chat. Perhaps, again, this is a question for Mr. Colors. So out of this budget, how much is being allocated in this first year for programs and community? And what is for probation specifically?
No, I wish I could answer that. I know right now our chief is at the County Board of Supervisors chambers for the next couple of days, and the budget is being set now. So unfortunately, I don't have that exact number. I don't even have a ballpark because of the nature of the new law and other programs that we have that could be going. We don't know for sure. I'm hoping Chief Yarber will have that information for you, or Chief Gonzalez, pretty soon.
Okay.
I apologize for not having a better answer for you though.
No, that's okay. I guess a follow-up question to that would be, like, once we do know, will that be something that will be shared with us as well?
I assume so. I know that I haven't been a part of this before, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what has been talked about previous. I think disclosure with all of you is probably the best course, so we can work together. And I'm hoping that would be the case. I'm assuming that would be the case.
Okay.
But even us, I'll be honest, like even in our committees here, as we're working on this, because of the state law hasn't even been set, we don't even know exactly what that would look like for us. So there's some of this stuff that we're looking forward to finding out the answers to. And I wish I was coming sooner so we can kind of dig in together and work on that.
No, it's all good. Thank you for your help. Another question, I think, from the audience. This one's coming from Daniel Silva from SAR. What trauma-informed programs have been chosen to do the work inside of YDF?
So one of the organizations working at the Stanford Youth Home, they're one of the groups that we're going to be working with, contracting. We already work with them. Like I said, UC Davis is another program that we have. We've been working with them for quite a long time. They've served our CSET population greatly already. And so they're a huge asset to us in training us and our staff. The STARS program is another one that we're working with. Those are the three main ones. But again, we're looking forward to more, like I said, just again, our Black Child Legacy campaign group. I think we have a lot of opportunity to even have more of those organizations be a part of what we're doing. But those are, I would say, are the three main right now for us.
Okay, thank you for answering that. We are at 6:30, so I'll ask my panelists, are you okay for staying for another 5 minutes? Are we okay with that? Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all so much. Y'all are champions. Thank you for hanging in there with me. We've got another question. This one comes from Amalia Villafan. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Is there anything being done to make parents of these youth go to counseling and drug rehab and training? So I guess kind of like, are there going to be supports for families as they help their youth go through this juvenile justice system? Yeah. Familial supports, I suppose.
What I'll say is that there's definitely been a conversation about that on the OICR level, about that holistic family support. We haven't had that conversation yet because we've been more so focused on advocating for transparency in these meetings, getting the public the ability to comment live on these meetings, or even simply view the recordings, which I'm not sure if those have been made available to the public yet. But that is something that is a really crucial part to the reentry process for young people. So that'll definitely be a part of our conversations moving forward.
Thank you.
Each of those agencies have the capability to support the entire family. And so a lot of them will have family partners, family advocates, and other types of services for everybody who is involved. So I don't know if it's happening. I just know that it's possible.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm trying to check out some more questions in the chat, Monica.
Yeah, there are some more questions, Nia. Miguel asked, and I don't know if we've asked this already, but
I think I
besides
got
having
that
meetings
one.
recorded, okay, let me remove it then. I think we're good. Oh, Mr. Colors, there are folks asking for your email. If you would like to share it in the chat, or the best way to contact you, basically, I think that would be appreciated by some folks on this call.
Yes, I can type my email in the chat if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that
Yes,
would be
thank
awesome.
you.
Okay. I'll do that now.
All right. I think the last question I'll end us with is, this is a more specific question, but I think that we have a lot of community-based organizations here in Sacramento who do direct work with justice impacted youth. I'm thinking in particular of people like EBAC, I'm thinking of people like Black Child Legacy, I'm thinking of people like SAR and Advanced Peace as well. So does your department have any plans moving forward in the future to kind of contract and partner with specific CBOs locally here in Sacramento who have proven to be helpful in their communities? I know you mentioned Stanford Home. I know you mentioned one other organization. I'm sorry, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but does probation have plans to partner with some of these more local CBOs that we know do this work? And if you do, when do we kind of plan on opening up facilities to those organizations?
The answer is yes in the short. As far as when and how and all that, I unfortunately have zero, I have no seat at the table with that decision. That's more for, again, Chief Yarber, Chief Gonzalez. Unfortunately, I hate to kick it to them, but in the facility, I deal with the operational part and the floor. As far as when that would open up, I don't know. I do know that, again, our community members are a big part of this, and we're looking forward to that. But I don't, again, when the budget's set and we have a better understanding of the law, I think we'll have a better understanding of when and how and who that would be. I can get, like I said, the Black Child Legacy is a huge thing for us. I know we have a lot of connections with that already, but I also know there's other people out there. So, but that's probably as best I could give you without knowing for sure budget and timelines from the state. So I'm sorry for lack of specifics with that.
No, that's all right. Thank you for trying. We appreciate you. And I've got Chief Yarber's email. I've got Chief Gonzalez's email. So I'll make sure that we reach out to them and we continue to ask these questions. We are at 6:35. So I am going to gently close us all out. Again, I want to say thank you to everyone who was able to attend today, all of our audience members, all of our panelists, Officer Colors and Asia, Coley, if you're still with us, thank you for performing. And again, just to remind everyone, this is just one opportunity, right? This is just one moment where we've come together to have a specific conversation. This is not the end of the conversation. And more importantly, it's going to take long-term commitment, like I identified earlier, right? If we want to see this go the way that would be best for our youth who are impacted by this system, then we need to stay dedicated to this conversation, and we need to make sure that we're checking in with each other. So I will be checking in with all of you. You will receive updates from me personally. I see that Officer Colors has shared his email in this chat. So if you have any direct questions for him, or you have a suggestion about how we can do this plan better, you have people you can speak with. And so I will close us out. Thank you so much for being in attendance today, and please enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening.